Students, have you ever lost your temper with a teacher? Story 1. Not me, but a girl flipped on my economics professor because she kept canceling class without sending out emails. The girl only had that class on Fridays and drove an hour to get there. It sucks she got caught in traffic just to get a note next to the classroom saying, "Cancelled." This happened to me in college. I was near the end of my senior year and needed to take an elective to satisfy degree requirements. I took basketball since I love the game. The professor was an assistant coach for the school's basketball team, and he didn't give up about the class. Our class starts at 8 a.m. in the old basketball gym on campus, and he was the only way that we could get into the gym. A few times, he had a colleague come open up the gym for us, but at least 7 or 8 times over the semester, he just didn't show up at all. So after 15 minutes, the students just went back to their dorms or apartments. I was a commuter driving 45 minutes each way, so I had to skip work on the days I had class. I was working to pay for school. Near the end of the semester, someone in class asked him about his attendance. Then he makes an announcement that anyone that doesn't show up for the final exam, basically whoever could make a basket, will be failed. On the day of the final exam, he didn't show up. No colleague, nothing. On that last day, there were 30 students freezing cold sitting outside of the gym in December. During professor evaluations, I ripped him a new one and wish I could have let him know to his face that his laziness cost me money. Story 2. Friend of mine wanted to go to a certain university that was out of state and somewhat tough to get into. The counselor told him to not waste his time as he would never get in. This pissed him off so much, he went to the principal, who told him to trust the counselor as that was her job. He applied anyways, got accepted, and taped 2 copies to the counselor and principal's door. He couldn't afford to go anyways, but he was trying to prove a point. He's a legend for standing up for himself. At a young age, kids are easily influenced by the words of authority figures, so they risk not following their hearts. It's a shame, and we should encourage more kids to chase their dreams. Story 3. Oof, that brought back a bad memory. My mother and father passed when I was in my final year of school. I was off school for a while around the time of the second funeral. When I returned to school, my tutor decided it was her job to tell the class what had happened with me, right there in front of everyone, instead of letting me do it on my own terms. To say I lost my temper would be an understatement. It's more common than you think. When my dad died, I was 18, senior year of high school. I was working our school's spring play and had a pretty important role as both an actor and the main writer/adapter of the play itself. I only missed a day of school because of that. My theater director and I were pretty close, so he decided that the best way to welcome me back to rehearsal was to announce, in front of the entire cast and crew, that my dad had died over the weekend and that he wanted them to sign a card for me. It was awkward as heck. Then, at the end of the year, we had an award ceremony to honor seniors in each subject, sport, etc. I won the Senior Drama Award, and when the director presented it, he retold the story of my father's death and my return to school to about 150 other students and their families and friends. When I was up on stage accepting the award, I wanted nothing more than to shrivel up and die. Sheesh, that is tough. It makes me wonder where the director's head is at. Like, why are you putting a student's business out like that? He probably had good intentions and wanted to garner sympathy for the student, but that is not the way to go. My heart goes out to you. Story 4. I flipped the F out on a logic professor who lost my assignments records. You didn't do them. I'm looking at your grades and they are zeros. That's why you have a D. Look, you dipsh. I have papers you graded right here. They aren't even good, but they are not zeros. It was over the phone, but eventually I read through his comments on my papers while he was trying to argue with me. That's when he's like, "Okay, that doesn't sound made up. Scan your papers and email them in." Went from a D to a B. Story 5. I flipped on several teachers, but this one still bugs me. One of my best friends in high school had died in a car accident, and a couple days later, my friends and I told my teacher we would not be able to make it to class because of the viewing. She then proceeded to tell us that we need to plan our days better and how irresponsible it was of us. I've never felt so much rage. Screw you, Mrs. Weaver. This same thing happened to my friend. Her mom was having a rough battle with cancer, and unfortunately lost. Her and her family are so tight-knit, it destroyed her losing her mom. She went to tell our AP Lit teacher her mother had passed away and asked if she could have more time for the essays we had due very soon. Teacher said no, she should plan better and get her assignments done. Friend went to the dean and the teacher got in a ton of trouble. She claimed she thought my friend was lying about her mother dying for more time for the essays. What kind of horrible person are you? It's someone's mom. I don't know anyone who'd lie about that. Best part is, she pulled the same on me when my grandma passed. F you. Are you kidding me? These teachers must live miserable lives to be behaving like that. No empathy whatsoever. Story 6. My IT teacher wanted to inspect my work, spreadsheets or a Word document or something. Anyway, she accidentally deleted the file. I was upset and tried to point out she just deleted my work. She started to shout at me, telling me I should have saved frequently. I shouted back, telling her that wasn't the issue. She outright deleted the file. It got pretty heated. My parents were called. We were outright yelling at each other for a good couple of minutes to the point where we were both in tears. I was about 14 at the time. She should have known better. A few years later, my sister had her when she went to that school, and that same teacher berated my sister, calling her names. What a female dog. How does she accidentally delete a file and then not accept responsibility? Her IT teaching rights should be revoked. Story 7. I know a student who once lost it in a lesson and threw a chair at the teacher. Some years, like 15 or so back, and the two are now good friends. Essentially, a discussion had turned into an argument, holding up the rest of the lesson, with the student basically being awkward and pedantic, not letting it go, getting unduly steamed up himself, and apparently not realizing that everyone was getting pretty tired. The teacher made some snide remark, and the student flipped, threw a chair, and walked out. He waited outside though, cooling off, and afterward, the teacher went outside as well, said something to the effect of, "I think we both ought to apologize for what just happened." And so they did, and all was well. At least the teacher was kind enough to apologize to the student. To the teachers out there, take notes if you ever get into it with your student and realize you were wrong. Speaking of, the chair throwing reminds me of a story I have. In elementary, our 5th grade teacher had gone on maternity leave, so we had a long-term substitute teacher filling in. His name was Mr. Poe, and a lot of the students did not respect him. One day, the class was acting up, not listening to him. He called out one specific kid, but then the kid started talking back to him. Mr. Poe had had enough, becoming so angry that he threw a whiteboard marker hard in the direction of the kid. The marker missed the kid, but that was the last day the class saw him. He got reported to the office and was out of there. Story 8. A couple of weeks into my senior year of high school, the president gave a speech about the importance of school or something. I don't know. I wasn't really paying attention. Anyway, all of the teachers in my school had to set up their projectors so we could watch it. My math teacher couldn't figure out how to get her projector working, so me, being the nerdy kid, offered to help. She had a fit, started screaming about how she wasn't stupid and how I needed to just sit down and shut up. After a few more minutes of her failing to fix it, she pointed at me and ordered me to fix it. I said, "Fix it yourself." She told the whole class to go next door to watch the speech in that teacher's room. When we got up to leave, she pulled me to the side and told me that when the class got back, I was going to stand up and apologize for being so rude to her. I refused and went to join the rest of the class. She spent the rest of the year making my life miserable. She told me on several occasions that she was going to make sure that I failed her class. Sure enough, I failed her class. Only class I ever failed. Edit, since people are asking why I didn't report it, I did. My parents went to the administrators, but they didn't want to do anything and said it was an issue for the math department head. The department head was a good friend of my teacher and took her side. The class wasn't a requirement for graduation, and it was the last semester before I was done with high school, so I didn't care to waste any more time on it. Edit 2. People are also asking how she can fail me at math since the answers are either right or wrong. I would turn in homework assignments, and she said she wouldn't get them. Students weren't allowed to keep a copy of the tests because the school was worried about test compromises, so she could basically give me whatever she wanted on them and I couldn't prove anything. If there was a dispute about the test grades, the school's policy was to have the department head regrade the test. But as I mentioned, the department head was a friend of hers and found that all of the tests that I disputed were graded correctly. Whether or not that was true, I don't know since I never got to see them. It's crazy how people who are supposed to be bettering your education would rather abuse their power and make your life miserable. Story 9. There was a high school English teacher, Miss Blades, who was ignoring me for a while. It's worth mentioning that she didn't really like me for some reason. I wasn't a bad or annoying kid. In fact, I was very non-confrontational and mostly kept to myself in and out of class. So I don't know what that was about. Anyway, I had my hand up because I had to use the bathroom, and she kept pacing about the room, answering other kids' questions, but would glance at me and immediately look away. After about 5 minutes with my hand up and getting ignored and about to poop my pants, I whistled as loud as I could. Interrupting anyone was completely out of character for me. Well, once upon a time, I had chipped one of my front teeth, so I could whistle extremely loud because of it. My whistle was just that. It was the whistling equivalent of firing a gun in a closed room, absolutely deafening. The entire room got quiet and she snapped her head around so fast. As her name might suggest, Miss Blades was staring daggers into my face. Then one kid goes, "Ooh, he just called you a dog. Ooh." Then she gained serious momentum from that one-off and said, "Oh, I don't think so. You think I'm a dog? You think I'm a dog?" I got sent to the principal's office for disrespecting an ignorant teacher. I used the bathroom on the way there. Edit. So there's been a lot of assumptions about Miss Blades, lol. I just wanted to say that I can totally vouch for her competence as a teacher, and she was often quite fun and energetic, but she did have one hell of an attitude if you didn't follow her rules. If it's an emergency, always just get up and go. If a teacher calls you out on it, you say, "I tried to ask you, but you ignored me, and now it's an emergency and I'm going to the restroom." I had a teacher once who wouldn't let you leave class unless you had a documented medical condition. This class was an hour and a half long, so obviously someone is going to need to use the restroom eventually. I was always too shy to just get up and go, which resulted in me having an infection from holding it in way too long, since most teachers wouldn't let you go and I didn't have time in between class. Always just go. You're allowed to use the restroom. Story 10. When I was in 8th grade, my science teacher decided the day before the last test of the year to give us an extra 16 pages of new material to learn by ourselves and appear in the test. Needless to say, everyone lost their and started complaining. I wrote her an angry letter. I was later forced either to apologize or they would tell my parents. I apologized because I may have been a little inappropriate. And by the end of the year, she was fired after her first year in the school. She also thought it was a good idea to bring her dogs to part of the lessons in the science lab when there are 2 kids who are allergic to dogs. I had a teacher that thought latex allergies were fake. One day, we did an experiment with balloons, and a kid said she was allergic to latex, and the teacher screamed, "No you ain't," then started rubbing her violently with the balloon. She got fired that semester. These teachers are wild. They're really endangering and harassing their students with something so serious. Students, y'all gotta look out for yourselves. Story 11. Did a math test, and on the paper, you could only mark your answer. You had to do the calculations on another paper. Long story short, my teacher lost my calculations paper and wouldn't admit it. He said I didn't hand it over, that I cheated, and some other crap. So I went to the school supervisor and asked to take the test again, and she let me. My teacher asked to look while I did the test. He made another test, way harder. I freaking aced it right in front of him. He hated my guts for the rest of high school, and I couldn't care less. I had a kid in my math class in my sophomore year of high school that was kind of slow at math, but got the hang of it eventually. The teacher didn't like him for whatever reason and made that publicly known when the kid was sick and missed the test. He came in the next day and asked to retake the test, and the teacher said he would email him when he could come take it. Well, he never did. So 2 weeks passed and the kid is like, "When can I take that test, Mr. Collins?" And Mr. Collins said, "You never came in to take it, so you get a 0. Tough luck." So the kid stands up and very calmly and firmly states, "You told me you would email me when to come take it, and you never did. I just lost all respect for you because of that." Mr. Collins threatened to send him to in-school suspension if he didn't sit back in his seat, and the kid replied, "I'm gonna go ahead and go to in-school suspension so I don't lose my temper on you. That was really not cool." And he just went to in-school suspension. Mr. Collins never let him retake that test. F math teachers who just want you to fail. And that is how you stand up to a teacher respectfully. But wait, we're not done with Mr. Collins just yet. This story might be worse. No, actually, it is worse. Okay, so teachers had thermostats they could control in their class. Most teachers were anal about the students touching them because they were easy to break. Mr. Collins claimed that my boyfriend had turned his AC all the way down without permission, which completely messed up the unit. This was destruction of school property, which calls for immediate expulsion. My boyfriend said he didn't do it. The school tries to make my boyfriend pay like $1,200 to fix it. He doesn't. After my boyfriend is expelled, Mr. Collins brags to his class that he had broken the unit on purpose, like it was a huge joke. He never apologized to my boyfriend, and the school didn't take back the expulsion. They dropped the demand for the money, but yeah, he was still banned from school property for something he didn't even do. Story 12. I once flipped on my German teacher. I'm German. She obviously didn't like me, and her marks were biased as this one time she gave me an F on a poetry interpretation. Grading that is ridiculous as you can just interpret it as whatever and the mark depends on the teacher's mood. I always got an A for grammar because the has to give me credit where my work is quantifiably good. After handing the papers back out to the students, she did some debriefing about the whole thing, comparing what everyone wrote. She told the whole class how good my passages about the poem were and wanted me to read out loud what I wrote. I just said, "You gave me an F," stood up and left. Poophead. I had an English teacher like this too. Nobody believed me until she randomly decided to have us make posters. Due the next day, I went above and beyond because I knew she liked crafty things and figured she couldn't possibly give me a bad grade if I was creative. "Oh, this poster is wonderful. Who made it?" "I did." "Oh," and she literally threw it in the trash. Story 13. I had a Spanish teacher, and in order to gain other students' sympathy, she would make fun of one of the students and kind of bully that student for this hour of class. Not that badly, but still. Of course, other students would sometimes laugh because the class was super boring, so it was like a show. I hated that. Of course, she would pick the students that didn't reply back to her provocation, the low profile type, and of course, she would use the perfect excuse just after being mean. "Oh, it's just a joke." Once, that guy that never searched for trouble from anyone was her victim of the day. She takes him as an example to describe a homeless guy on a picture. After 10 freaking long minutes, he stands up and leaves the classroom crying. And when she stops him before he leaves, he tells her his dad died the previous night and pushed her away. Once the door closed behind him, she paused for a second and faked the crying voice to repeat what he had just said. "My dad just died. Cry, cry. Poor baby." Before I realized it, she received my Spanish book in the face, and I called her an ugly sloot. I bet you the teacher learned a valuable lesson that day. It feels like some of these teachers have been getting away with all this BS without any consequences, so they keep doing it. Shout out to the student in this story for handing out a well-deserved consequence and sticking up for a fellow student. Story 14. I had a bout of stomach flu, which was so intense that it damaged my intestines, and as a result, my body couldn't process certain foods for a while. This caused me severe pain. I mainly had cramps that were so bad, I couldn't do anything useful anymore, except curl up and wait for them to be over. It took me more than a month to figure out a very limited amount of safe stuff to eat, which I ended up slowly expanding on over time. I did miss a few weeks of school when it first started though. Directly after my math teacher's class, she insisted I come to her and explain why I missed so many of her classes. I had a note from my doctor ready, but she dismissed it. She told me she could tell that I wasn't sick, but that I was just being lazy and lying to everyone, and that she was severely disappointed in me. I literally just walked away, which is the closest I ever got to having a temper tantrum in class. In retrospect, I wish I had told her what I was really thinking, being that I was very disappointed in her. I was pretty sick for a while, and the teacher asked me why I wasn't in the last few classes, and I said I was sick. The teacher said, "You're not sick. You look completely healthy." I said, "Oh, look at you with the all-powerful eyes that can see disease inside of people at an instant." He realized what he said, apologized, and told me to sit down. He didn't like me anymore, which is rare, and just kind of let me do my own thing for the rest of the semester. The other thing is, if you're back, wouldn't you be reasonably healthy again if you're back? Why did you miss class? I was sick. You don't look sick. Well, yeah, that's why I'm back now. Story 15. When I was in high school, we had this small, angry teacher that played rugby, or at least tried to, that was always belittling students to feel better about himself. One day, we had physical ed, and our teacher couldn't come, so the little and always moody teacher that played rugby came to replace her. Little teacher was trying to show off his skills at rugby and making our class play some game where we had to tackle the person who had the ball. We didn't tackle hard enough, so the little guy joined to tackle some students and show off his grandness. He was having fun being unstoppable and yelling at us if that was all we could do. I was kind of mad, so I just went running full speed at him. Little teacher got tackled and hit the ground so hard. That was something our class laughed about all year. Story 16. My 8th grade math teacher. She was the absolute worst and ruined any appreciation I had for mathematics forever. She'd purposely skip chapters and mark correct answers wrong if you wrote numbers a certain way. For example, you never put that little dash at the top of your number 7 and your answer was wrong. Also, pop quizzes. She had this rule where a pop quiz could cover any material out of the book, even if it was something we hadn't gone over yet. And it's not like we could take the book home to study. It was one of those classes where the textbook had to be left in the classroom. I just quit doing any work for her after that. It royally pissed her off. Story 17. When I was a senior in high school, I had an AP English teacher that would grade people based on how much she liked them, essentially. I had long hair and stretched earlobes, and she despised me, even though I was an excellent student in all aspects. She claimed I didn't turn in assignments on time to justify my grades, so I spoke with my guidance counselor, and she investigated for me. Turns out, she had sorted completed assignments into piles of good and bad, and would arbitrarily grade the papers based on who she felt sucked up to her the most that day. I presented a book report on the Odyssey, which was by far the longest and most detailed presentation of the whole class, and she gave me a D. I told her, "F you, this is the end of your career," and walked out because I had sent an identical copy to the guidance counselor. She presented it to the school board, eventually got her fired, and the best part was, she was also a driver's ed instructor and lost her job doing that as well. Apparently, I wasn't the first to speak up about her, but I was the one that put the nail in the coffin, and it felt great. Story 18. I had a history teacher in high school who claimed the following: America caused the Holocaust. Americans did the Pearl Harbor attack just to join the war. JFK was planted by the Soviets. 9/11 was an inside job. The icing on the cake was when Chris Kyle was murdered. She says, "Nobody cares about dead soldiers," and proceeded to spend an hour covering the life and career of Whitney Houston. I got up and walked out of the room at that point. She left after 1 year there. It must be so awkward when you get a conspiracy theorist as a teacher. I feel bad for all the students in that class.